Hi, science friends. I have an update. Unfortunately, I received an email announcing my dismissal from my PhD program today. I just want to let you know, incoming students, there is a lot of just pure bureaucratic hell and funding issues going on in science right now. So if you're thinking about applying to a PhD program or if you're entering a program this fall, please just be aware that you may be in this position. And I've reached out to over 50 PIs and I've had multiple meetings and I have found multiple PIs with funding. But because of my program's bureaucratic policies, none of them were able to enter my program or take me on. I'm going to make another video later today and give you all an update. I want to clarify some things and stop the spread of misinformation going on. I want to explain how funding works, especially as a first year in a PhD program. No, I was not a DEI hire. I was not associated with any DEI grants in any way whatsoever. I may look like I am, but that was not the case. My funding was covered by the school itself, and this is very common with most PhD programs. In the first year, you're expected to find a lab, and the lab takes over your funding. However, for the students who don't find labs, the grad school has no more funding for them, and they end up falling through the cracks. This is just how the system works. In a broader sense, your tax dollars do fund programs like this through the NIH or the DoD. Those organizations distribute funds to labs nationwide after scoring grants to see which science they consider to be the most important to fund at the time. Literally save lives. While we are aware that DEI has been targeted highly in science and other research areas right now, this was not the case with me, nor with any of the other students who were also dismissed, and none that I actually know of at other institutions as well. This lack of funding is a broader systematic issue that results from labs being scared or worried or not receiving grants, not even DEI related. It's just the climate right now.
I wrote a longer piece for MedCity News this week on the Trump administration's massive funding cuts to the NIH and the impact that those are likely to have on, well, in terms of delaying novel treatments and technologies, delaying the commercialization of those, as well as just hurting the US's position as a leader in healthcare and technology. I talked to a lot of experts on this topic, and a theme that kept coming up was that NIH grant money often makes innovations possible, and it really often serves as an early validation tool for certain research or for startups. So I wanted to look more into that claim. So for startups that receive NIH funding, how many of them go on to raise money from private investors or from venture capital investors? And for these technologies that are sponsored by the NIH, through their funding money, how often do these become FDA approved products or new treatments? So I found some research showing that startups that have secured NIH funding are 10 to 15 times more likely to go on and secure venture capital, and that 65% of these startups raise at least $5 million or more. And the NIH also actively monitors the outcomes of its funded research, especially for things like patents and commercialization. The agency's most recent data is from fiscal year 2023, and during that time period, the US issued 87 patents to NIH-funded technologies, and the FDA approved 3 new treatments that were born out of NIH-funded research. These 3 new FDA-approved treatments were all pretty notable too. There was the first RSV vaccine ever approved for people ages 60 and older. There also was the first gene therapy ever approved for hemophilia, and there was a new immunotherapy for melanoma. So with this conversation surrounding the NIH funding cuts, I think it's interesting to look at the data showing the NIH's success rate when it comes to all the research and all the projects that it funds. And when looking into that, I thought the numbers were pretty interesting, and hopefully you did too.
My name is Dr. Charity Oyedeji. I'm a hematologist and researcher focused on improving care for people with sickle cell disease. I received a notice on June 16, 2025, that my K Award, a 5-year $750,000 federal NIH grant to improve care for people with sickle cell disease as they age was suddenly and unjustly terminated despite strong scientific evidence and early proven results. The termination notice stated that research with equity objectives does nothing to expand our knowledge of living systems and are quote-unquote low return on investment and don't enhance health, and also are harmful to Americans. These statements are inaccurate and disrespectful for so many reasons. Sickle cell disease is a painful, life-limiting genetic disorder that can be inherited by people of all racial and ethnic backgrounds around the world. Sickle cell disease primarily affects Black people in the United States. My research was focused on developing the first and only functional assessment and the first and only exercise program tailored to the unique needs of older adults with sickle cell disease called SickleFit. SickleFit is a low-cost, high-impact intervention that can reduce healthcare costs, can improve quality of life for this underserved population. Ending this project not only silences promising solutions for a neglected group of patients, but also sends a devastating message to future researchers that even life-changing, evidence-based science can be discarded without cause. My question is, what can be done to overcome these grant terminations, and how do researchers doing impactful work for underserved populations find a way forward? Thank you.
Do you know what it's like to have your dream to become the first physician in your family squashed overnight because of the government? It sucks. It really sucks. I've been working for the past few years to get experience at applied medical school. I've been studying for the MCAT while working a full-time and a part-time job in order to make ends meet. I'm scheduled to take the MCAT on August 22nd, and I can't even go anymore because I can't take out more student loans. Private student loans would destroy me financially, even as a physician. And I don't even know what to do anymore. All of the work for the past 5 to 8 years just gone overnight.
I'm halfway through medical school, and I have $50 to my bank account. Federal loans are what keep me alive while I'm in school because I can't have a job when I'm in school. Medical school takes all of your time, especially when you're chronically ill and you have all of these doctor appointments and all of the medical bills to pay for. And I am well over the new cutoff for federal loans, Grad Plus loans. It's a scary thing to think about by the fact that I have no idea how this is gonna work.
Haven't posted a video in a while, but if you're a pre-med, yesterday was a pretty terrible day in history. Big beautiful bill got passed, and they're capping federal student loans at $150,000 total. How are we paying for medical school, guys? Anybody just have $445,000 laying around by chance?
They come up with every possible way to shut you out. And who do you suppose made that Citizens United decision? Well, it was the Supreme Court. I mean, look at education, at higher education in the United States. A functioning democracy requires an informed and educated public. That's what Thomas Jefferson said. He said that a well-informed citizenry is the best defense against tyranny. So what can you deduce might be the objective when you make education prohibitively expensive? When you set up a system to restrict access to education for the citizenry and make it only accessible for the rich? Well, that's a recipe for tyranny, according to one of your own founding fathers, but that's what you're doing. I mean, my mother was still paying off her student loans when she was in her 70s. And you keep finding new ways to discourage people from going to university. It's not enough that you expect an 18 or 20-year-old to come up with more money than it takes to buy a house just to be able to get a degree. That's not enough. So you have to start creating useless degrees, useless so-called disciplines, degrees in electronic feminist activism, degrees in navel gazing, so that you can then start to say, well, university is really pointless. As if there aren't still degrees available in the sciences, in law, in business, in history, in the fundamental disciplines. You make people think that university is all just a joke. You set up all of these absurd degree programs to make university look like it's pointless. So why bother? Everyone thinks, just why bother? Why should I go into debt just to get a useless degree? Meanwhile, the children of the elite are still going to university because they're the ones who are on track to be the managers of society. They're on track to rule you. I mean, why do you think that they didn't allow slaves to learn to read in the South? The same reason that they don't want you to be educated. Because you're serfs. The U.S. is looking to revive domestic manufacturing. They want to bring back offshore factory jobs back to the U.S. They want you to be on an assembly line. They don't want you to have a lot of big ambitions about your future. They don't want you to have the intellectual tools for self-sufficiency or critical thought so that you can actually see and recognize and understand what your society really is. Everything about the society is calculated to marginalize the population. And one of the main instruments that they use to marginalize the population is the constant repetition about how free and how democratic it is. They want you to look at the education system in America and believe that illiteracy and crumbling schools are just part of the natural struggle of a free nation. But how can that be? How can this be natural when the wealthiest country in the world, so-called, has 1 in 5 adults who are unable to read or complete basic tasks? How can it be anything but a failure that millions of children are denied a basic education, that millions will be pushed into a lifetime of poverty? They want you to think that's human nature? This is not human nature. This is neglect. It's a betrayal of the very people that they claim to empower, that so-called civilization claims to empower better than anyone else. And look at homelessness, the misery of families living on the streets, in tents, in cars, over 500,000 people on any given night in the United States with nowhere to call home. Millions more who are barely able to afford their rent, who are just moments away from homelessness. They'll tell you again, what? That this is the natural result of an open economy, of a free market economy, that some will rise and some will fall. That's just how freedom works. But this is not freedom. This isn't the freedom that they promised. This is abandonment. A society that discards its own people and tells them that that's just the way it is. And why don't you call them what they really are? Why do you say homeless? Why do you say unhoused? They are internally displaced people. Displaced by your own system, by your own society. Refugees with no refuge. Not by a traditional war, but by a system that functions as a form of economic war against its own population. Is it any wonder that they have an epidemic of mental illness in that country? Over 21% of American adults suffer from mental health issues. Nearly half of teens express having feelings of deep sadness, depression, and hopelessness. Another 48,000 lives every year are lost to suicide because they've normalized isolation. They've normalized empty consumption and an endless chase for meaning in a society that offers you none. They want you to think this is natural. This isn't human nature. It's a distortion of it. This is the result of a culture that strips life of any purpose and strips society of community itself. I mean, a human being would not commit self-murder if they lived in a society that values human beings. And look at the devastation of addiction in that country. It's just another form of suicide, just slow motion. 100,000 people dying of drug overdoses in a single year. Families destroyed, communities hollowed out by opioids, fentanyl, substances that numb people from the misery around them. Is this addiction the mark of a free spirit? Or is it a symptom of lives emptied of any kind of connection? And people who've been made to feel worthless, who are seeking some kind of an escape from a reality that seems inescapable. But they want you to accept it as natural. But this is the consequence of a society that feeds on people's weakness, that profits from their suffering. I'm telling you, your own so-called civilization hates you. And you accuse me of hating America when no one could possibly hate you more than America hates you. No one could hate the American people more than the American system and the American society hates itself. You put your own people in debt, buried under $17 trillion worth of debt, struggling under the weight of a system that promises prosperity but delivers poverty. 40% of Americans can't even afford any unexpected expenses. This is survival of the richest, not survival of the fittest. That's not freedom, and that's not natural. And they want you to believe that poverty and hunger, even in this so-called land of abundance, is just, again, part of the natural order. There's nothing that can be done about it. Over 37 million people who are in poverty in America, over 34 million who are food insecure, including children. Now, this isn't natural, it's an abomination. It's the product of a society that commodified everything, even the basic necessities of life, putting profit above people at every level. Most people are so misled by American propaganda about itself that they can't even process or register what they see themselves and experience in their own lives. So they actually are living in third world conditions, most of them, but they believe that they're living in the richest country in the world. No, you don't live in the richest country in the world. You have the richest individuals in the world living in your country. That's all. And you'll never be one of them. Do you know what percentage of Americans are billionaires? 0.0002%. 95% of Americans can't even make a six-figure income. There's only 800 individuals in your country, 800 individuals, and they have more wealth than the bottom 50% of the entire population. In America, infants and mothers die at rates higher than in any other developed country in the world, so-called developed. The broken infrastructure that you've got, the broken roads, the crumbling bridges, public services, that's your free market system. And you're told to be proud of it. And it's going to get worse.